Welcome to this explainer. If you think the history of the automobile starts with Henry Ford, or heck, even Carl Benz, well, prepare to be completely surprised. Today, we're going to look back at an absolutely incredible era of engineering. We're talking about a time when steam, not gasoline, ruled the roads. It is a fascinating journey, packed with brilliant inventors, bizarre mishaps, and a fierce technological rivalry that literally shaped the modern world.
Okay, let's dive into this. Right now, we hear constantly about the battle between electric vehicles and gas engines. It feels like this super modern debate, right? But what if I told you that exact same battle was raging well over a century ago? Let's jump back to the year 1900. Just take a guess. What do you think was the most popular car engine on the road right at the turn of the 20th century?
So the actual census data from 1900, it completely shatters what we assume today. Steam, yes, steam, commanded a massive 40% of the market share. Electric vehicles were right on its tail at 37%. And gas, believe it or not, gas was in dead last place at just 22%. Back then, gas-powered cars were just seen as slow, smelly, and honestly totally unrefined for city driving. To figure out why steam was the absolute king of the road, we actually have to rewind the clock a bit.
The whole quest for self-propelled vehicles actually kicked off with some pretty wild, eccentric experiments. Way back around 1672, a Flemish Jesuit named Ferdinand Verbiest built this tiny 65-centimeter steam-powered toy for the Chinese Emperor Kangxi. Obviously, nobody was riding that, but it proved the core concept. Steam could drive wheels. Then, fast forward to 1769, and French inventor Nicolas-Joseph Cugnot creates the Fardia à vapeur. And wow, this was no toy. It was a literal 4-ton steam-powered artillery tractor built for the French army. Going from a little tabletop curiosity to a heavyweight hauling machine was just a monumental leap in engineering.
So, the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. The true precursors to the automobile arrived over 200 years before Carl Benz ever filed his famous gasoline car patent. Just think about that for a second. 2 entire centuries. Steam technology didn't just casually compete with early gas engines, it practically invented the whole concept of a motor vehicle hundreds of years in advance.
Now, of course, those early days were packed with trial, error, and some genuinely spectacular mishaps. Take 1801, for instance. British inventor Richard Trevithick builds this experimental steam vehicle he called the Puffing Devil. He actually manages to drive it right up a hill in Cornwall with several people just clinging onto the side of it. But here is the absolute best part. After this highly successful test run, the driver and the passengers just left it running unattended so they could hit a local pub to celebrate. Well, while they were inside having a pint, the boiler ran dry and the Puffing Devil literally set the shed it was parked in on fire and completely destroyed itself.
But honestly, Trevithick wasn't about to let a little pub-related disaster stop him. By 1803, he bounces right back and builds the London steam carriage, which is widely considered the world's first true self-propelled passenger vehicle. He actually put this thing together in London and successfully drove it right through the capital's streets. It proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that passenger steam travel was actually a tangible reality.
Things were advancing so fast that even government started paying serious attention. By 1831, a select committee of the British House of Commons went on the record, explicitly stating that the substitution of inanimate for animal power is one of the most important improvements ever introduced. The British government was officially recognizing that swapping out horses for steam was a total revolution for everyday transportation.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what the British government was getting so hyped about. Inventor Walter Hancock wasn't just messing around with prototypes in the 1830s. He was out there building a full-blown commercial steam bus empire in London. The rapid progression here is just astounding. He kicks things off with the Infant in 1831, carrying 10 passengers. 2 years later, the Enterprise arrives, carrying 14. And then, the massive Automotive in 1838. That one could hit up to 15 miles per hour and carry 22 people. The entire momentum of public transit was shifting straight towards steam. To really wrap your head around Hancock's success, you just need to hear one number: 12,000. Hancock's flagship steam buses safely transported over 12,000 paying passengers across more than 700 individual journeys in London. We're not talking about some quirky science fair novelty here. This was a fully functioning, highly utilized public transit system running all the way back in the 1830s. But, major innovation always sparks major resistance.
The sheer success of these steam buses absolutely terrified the traditional horse-drawn carriage operators. Feeling totally threatened by this new tech, they went out of their way to actively sabotage the early steam routes. You had angry horse proprietors literally throwing stones to block Hancock's buses, or they deliberately clog up the road so the steam carriages couldn't get past. It was a literal turf war for the streets of London. In the end, though, it wasn't just the sabotage that brought commercial steam down. It was the massive practical limitations of the technology itself. Steam had some crippling economic and logistical disadvantages. First off, 45-minute cold start times. Just imagine having to wait almost an hour every morning just to start your commute. Plus, they ran on dirty coal fuel. The hard water caused brutal scaling inside the boilers, which meant constant, exhausting maintenance. And the real nail in the coffin? Punitive turnpike tolls. The government was charging steam carriages 48 shillings for routes where horse-drawn coaches only paid 4 shillings. It just became financially impossible to compete.
So, by the time we circle back to the year 1900, car buyers were stuck with a really tough choice. On the one hand, steam cars at the time were actually faster and quieter than early gas cars, but they were incredibly finicky, super expensive, and you still had to deal with that agonizingly long 45-minute warm-up. It was an exhausting process before you even moved an inch. On the other hand, the early gas cars were painfully slow, extremely smelly, unmuffled, and required this really difficult and honestly downright dangerous hand crank just to turn the engine over. Basically, neither option was exactly perfect yet. Let's move to the internal combustion engine and see how this momentum builds, because gas technology was evolving at a blistering pace. In 1860, Etienne Lenoir builds the very first internal combustion engine running on gas. Fast forward a bit to 1876, and German mechanic Nikolaus Otto patents his highly efficient 4-stroke engine. Then, just a decade later, in 1886, Carl Benz patents the motor wagon, the very first modern automobile explicitly designed from the ground up to run on a gasoline engine. That technological gap between steam and gas was closing, and it was closing fast. So what was the real turning point that gave gasoline its ultimate victory? Well, it was a massive combination of technological and logistical leaps. The invention of the electric starter motor was an absolute game changer. It completely wiped out the need for that dangerous hand crank. Gas engines also became vastly more reliable, so you weren't constantly repairing them like you were with those complex steam boilers. Plus, splashing some fuel into a gas tank was lightning fast compared to firing up a boiler, providing way better range. Top it all off with mass production driving the cost down, and steam simply didn't stand a chance anymore. Looking back at this entire history, it really proves one amazing point. Technological supremacy is never a guaranteed thing. Steam had a 200-year head start, and it was still completely dethroned by internal combustion. Today, we're watching this massive shift back toward electric vehicles, totally echoing the exact same market share battle we saw in 1900. So, I want to leave you with this to ponder. What's going to replace today's dominant engines in the next century? Are we going to see history repeat itself, or are we on the verge of something entirely new? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the road ahead.